Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hello, everybody. Welcome to a very special bonus episode of the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast. And for this episode, we have joining us Samantha Corbett and Jeff Campbell. Hi, guys.
Hey, Vasco.
Hi.
So Samantha is an Agile coach at Meltwater. She previously worked in IT project management, and she credits finding Agile and Lean as the exciting alternative from the traditional 9-to-5. At Meltwater, she has been focused on training, coaching, and developing the platform business unit. And we also have Jeff. Jeff is a habitué and a friend of the show. He's an Agile coach who considers the discovery of Agile and Lean one of the most defining moments of his life and considers helping others to improve their working life, not to simply be a job, but a social responsibility. He's also the author of the Actionable Agile Tools book, which you can get on Amazon or directly from the author at bit.ly/AAT book. And the link is also on the show notes. So Samantha and Jeff, you guys are going to talk to us about the community of Agile coaches that you helped create and grow at Meltwater. So walk us through that. What prompted Meltwater and yourselves to start working on that community of practice for Agile coaches?
Yeah, so I think the first thing there is maybe creates being a little overly generous to us, but I mean we've certainly been involved in the growing part of it. So we first of all need to give a little credit to our boss Ruth there. She was at first the only Agile coach, and then I believe I was the second, and I don't know if Samantha was the third, but she was no more than the fourth, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, somewhere in the beginnings of the. Yeah, and I think when we talk about community, we're a team, so it's a team of about 9 Agile coaches, and we're located across the globe, which is really cool. And I think Ruth is our manager, and she has done a great job of growing us as a team. But then I think that the individuals and the individual coaches have done a great job of sort of creating and empowering one another.
Absolutely. And what got you guys started? What started, perhaps what was the reason Ruth started first hiring you guys and then growing that worldwide community?
So I think, I guess I can speak to it as I was sort of the second coach brought on board. I think we were starting to see pain in the organization in a lot of sort of different ways. And it was structured very, very differently back then. Basically, we had all of our decision making was made in one part of the world, and our UI was built in one part of the world, and our back end systems were built in another part of the world, and all of these were separated by like 12 time zones, and that caused all the problems we anticipated causing, right? This decision making was extremely slow, and trying to do anything required so much coordination that really nothing ever got done, and sort of all the problems that are common with that setup. So I think we started growing the group first of all because we knew we wanted to change that, and we needed people who had some sort of good idea of how to do that.
Yeah, and I think now, from the time that the coach team started, I don't know the exact numbers, but maybe we were about 150 in product and engineering. And now we've also gone through a lot of growth within the product and engineering org over the past, I'd say, 5 years or so. So maybe we're now at 300, and we've also expanded locations. So there we found an opportunity for coaches to join the teams that we've also acquired and then bring them into the culture of Meltwater as a bonus.
Yeah, and then I think we wanted to talk a little bit about sort of our, mine and Sam's relationship and how we've worked together, because I think, like a lot of organizations, we started hiring these coaches, but they were all sort of in different places and working in different ways, and there was sort of that growth process, that creation of the community that you're talking about, Vasco, is a thing that we had to go through and have sort of learned some lessons from.
What were some of the problems that you guys started to see before you decided to actually start deliberately working on getting these coaches together, doing things together, learning from each other? What were some of the pains that you started to see among the Agile coaches?
I think, well, if I remember looking back, so we were individual coaches that were not part of the same team or under the same manager. And then I think they started seeing that as a challenge in the org because there wasn't a unified either path for the Agile coaches to follow in terms of career, but also sort of unified ways of practice because we were getting different management and different coaching styles depending on who your manager was, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But then there was an opportunity for our manager to manage all of the coaches together. But even after that happened, I don't think that we became this super team. I think we started seeing like, okay, we now have the same manager, but are we really performing as a team? And the coaches were the ones to really point that out. And we decided that there was a lot of opportunity for us to learn from one another, but we needed to find ways to do that. And one of the simplest things we've done is, a monthly meeting between all of us, which seems, really simple, but I think it's made a massive difference because that's where we identify what's going on in the org. And then are there things that we need to pair on? And then you get to be able to work with coaches from, Canada or London or San Francisco. And it's really great.
And I think one of the sort of big issues before we became a team is all of the coaching was based on your geography. So you were coaching your office and trying to accomplish things for your office, which of course even sometimes might have put you in conflict with other coaches as they were trying to coach for their office and the improvement of their office, right? There was no sort of unified vision of where we were trying to go. So everybody was just sort of optimizing locally rather than optimizing globally. So bringing us all together and making us a single team really helped in that.
Actually, that's a very good point. One of the things that I very often witness, and it doesn't, it's not restricted to Agile coaches. Pretty much all organizations, all kinds of roles have that problem. They have different parts of the organization. They have kind of a different perspective on reality, right? And they try to optimize for what they see. And obviously, because you're working on one team or one department, you don't really see the whole. So one of the things that is very interesting about the community you guys created is this explicit attempt, deliberate attempt to work on the whole, right? It's like what Samantha introduced with that monthly meeting, which helps identify what's going on in the wider organization and brings the coaches together. Is that something you guys have witnessed thanks to this Agile Coach community that you're starting to see more of the whole?
It's definitely something I experience all the time. I think very frequently, at least for me, what I find is that the coaches end up sort of being the peacemakers, as it were, between groups of people who end up in conflict because they're trying to optimize for their team, right? And one of the approaches I'm definitely consciously using a lot of the time is meeting directly with their coach and saying, well, this is what my team thinks. And then they say, well, this is what my team thinks. And, we're the ones working together trying to find where those things can sort of meld together and planning activities to actually attack these problems so that we're all sort of pulling in the right direction.
Yeah, I think that actually is a great example of what the coach team has enabled. So because we've developed relationships with the other coaches and there's this trust within our own team, you are really able to create that connection and understand the other team's perspective by talking to the other coach. And you learn a lot of things, right? Like you look at that team and you think, oh, why are they pushing so hard? Why are they acting that way? And then the coach can give you some insights that you wouldn't have been able to have. And then you can help coach your team to work better with that team, depending on what they're going through.
And we're going into the benefits already. So let me ask this question because I think it's a beautiful segue. Right? Of course, there are some benefits of having this community, as you guys were just describing. One of the questions I get asked all the time is, how do I show the value of having like this Scrum Masters in the organization? A recent client went through a problem like that where they weren't sure about the value of Scrum Masters and they had to have an internal discussion and dialogue in the organization. So I'm sure you guys get asked that. that, and you have had to prove it. Otherwise, you would not have been able to set up that team. So, or Ruth would not have been able to set up the team and you guys to grow the community. So what do you think about it today? How do I show the value of having a group of Agile coaches or Scrum Masters in my organization?
Yeah, this question, it makes me smile because one of the first teams I worked on, there was a lot of questions about how do you specifically as an Agile coach show your value? And it's difficult, right? You're not producing something specific like a team, and you need to think about it from a few different perspectives. And for an individual coach, I think about it as you can be measured through delivery metrics. And if your team is performing, then you're performing. But I also think it's about whether or not you can find impactful problems to solve. And are you making, efforts on those? But on a leadership level, and I think what I've learned the most from our manager, Ruth, is that she often says you show value through the work that you've done. And I think that's what is credited to the success of the Agile Coach team, is that we've run really, some high profile initiatives and things that the rest of the company have seen. And now they say, I want to coach, and the teams are sort of fighting over who can get one. And they feel like they're left out if they don't have one. So yeah, I think I'll take it as the showing value through the work that you do.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly where a lot of organizations sort of have trouble and sort of fall down on this. When that question gets asked, which it inevitably does, and it's a very fair question, they focus on what kind of metrics can I show? What can I actually measure that I'll be able to present a number to my senior management that shows the impact of this? And what I think our boss did fantastically was figuring out where are there pain points in the organization that the skill sets of the coaches can help with. So a really great example is just our big room meetings. Every organization has a lot of big room meetings, and they're always painful and they never work well. But she was very good at identifying how we could come in and improve those, how we could spend time and energy planning them out and helping to execute on them, and just making them work in a far more improved way. And then it's not a metric, but when everybody sees this meeting that they were in that was horrifically painful for years, and they see suddenly 2 or 3 Agile coaches showed up to the thing and the quality of it improved so much, then that, they feel like you're impactful, which is really more important than a number I can show. And then I think that gets into a big topic we want to talk about between myself and Sam is getting the right coaches to do the right job. And finding the people who are.
What do you mean by that?
So one of the good things with the community we've created, and again with our boss, who we're going to keep giving credit to, is it's very good at knowing that not everybody is the right person to do a job. So I'll give a very specific example, I think is a good way to go with this. So quite a few years back, and I'd say this is when we just started getting involved in the coaches helping out with more of these things, we had a really big, important product meetup. And it was where all of the most senior people in product were going to get together, and they were going to try and make a plan and make a lot of decisions that needed to be made. And these meetups have been done in the past, and really they were an entire day of PowerPoint, and they were not terribly engaging, and there wasn't a great feedback process. There was a lot of sort of issues that revolved around it. So our boss asked me and Sam and her to get involved and sort of help plan this meetup. And so to get into the right person for the right job, she was very good at knowing how to use each of our talents. So I'm very good at the sort of the big room thing. I'm very good at standing in front of a crowd of people with, speaking in a loud voice and sort of getting everybody to have a little laugh, but sort of also commanding the attention of the room. But what I'm not great at is once we break into those smaller groups, the very thing that made me good at the big room is what makes me very disruptive in a smaller group, because I'm loud and I tend to take over a conversation. And, when I'm speaking, all of a sudden I'm controlling the room just through my very nature. But Samantha's very good at that sort of thing. Samantha's very good at working in a small group, having a plan of what we're going to execute on and executing on that plan. So the sort of two of us coming together to work on those things together really made the entire thing better than it would have been otherwise.
So it sounds to me that you guys took an approach of deliberately tackling certain problems and then finding who might be the right person to bring their native skills and also developed skills to that particular problem. You talked about big room planning as one of those aspects that you deliberately participated in and helped the company progress, as well as showed the value of Agile Coach, who I think is a great example of that idea of showing value through what you do. What are some other examples that we as Agile Coaches and Scrum Masters might keep our eyes open and ears open to listen to those pains and then go in and help with our skills, with our knowledge, with our experience?
I can speak for a global organization. I think it's keeping your ears out for common themes across teams and coaches. So that usually points to that's a big pain point. And then also, like, as the coaches are set up now, we're set up kind of per business unit. So you have about 10 teams in which you are responsible for the Agile coaching needs of. And then I think that gives you a lot of information about where to focus your energy. And then also developing more closer relationships with your leadership teams. That way you have an idea of not just what's happening sort of on the ground, but also a level up. And then you can see it from a full systems point of view.
So you mean not only working with the teams that are developing the product or the service, but also coming into the regular meetings that management holds between them and listening to that side of what the problems are, right?
Yep. And Jeff and I have deliberately created some leadership meetings and teams to sort of suss out those problems specifically for the business unit that we're working in. So it's also, exposing the problems to leadership, but also hearing the problems of leadership. And then you're able to bring that and decide together how you want to tackle it within the teams.
And so I think Sam's touching on something really important there as well, is, we set up these leadership meetings in our business unit, and there was never sort of any question about whether we were leaders and we're supposed to do that sort of thing. First of all, because now we're very much considered to be leaders at Meltwater, working as Agile coaches. That grew through, us tackling delivery problems, as we discussed earlier. But, eventually it became sort of a company-wide statement that, coaches are on the sort of same, they form this triumvirate, I think is the right word, a pair of three, together with the product owner and the people manager. The Agile coach is a member of that, and that's sort of an equal circle that works to tackle problems and provides sort of a different perspective. Each of those roles provides a different perspective on what a problem is. And so eventually we got to a point where we could do that. But just as Sam said earlier, we got to that point by showing value through the work. So, for instance, I think the leadership meetings are an excellent example of that. You go into these, and if they're not working well, then Sam immediately goes and sets up a Kanban board and starts tracking, what sort of things we have going on. She's asking the question of, when are we going to follow this up? She's creating the documents where we're going to collaborate. She's bringing all those tools of being a coach that we find so valuable in other contexts to the leadership meeting and applying it there. And I think this has to do with Meltwater's culture in general, but I think you have a lot of Agile coaches in the world as a whole who are waiting to be told what to do and waiting to be told what to focus on and sort of asking permission to do things. And that's not really the way we operate. If we see a problem, we're sort of empowered to go and do something about it and get involved. And, again, going back to that group, we might bring the problem to the group and ask, do a few other coaches want to collaborate to solve this with me? But we're empowered to sort of go and do that. Not even just empowered, expected, really. It's not the sort of organization where you just sit around and wait to be told what to do.
So I've heard many times that being a Scrum Master or an Agile coach is a little bit like herding cats. Now, of course, being a Scrum Master or an Agile coach in a group of Scrum Masters or Agile coaches, I'm sure it's herding Wildcats. When there are this many people involved, you guys are 9, everyone in a different geography, everyone with a different perspective and experience at least. How do you get these individual coaches and of course also other stakeholders, obviously, like you said, the people manager, the product owner, to work well together?
I mean, I'll have to say that I might be the worst participant. I'm a great Agile coach, but really bad participant. So I think when I think about this question, I think it's the divide and conquer technique. I think that is really where we do really well. So like we bring together the coaches, we talk about problems we see, and then it's really, as we say, we pair strengths and people who are passionate about solving that specific issue. And then a lot of times you find those relationships that work really well. And for instance, between Jeff and I, we can see the initiative, the problem that we need to solve. We can go on our own and sort of do some research, gather some thoughts, maybe create some ideas. And then when we come back together, so this diverge, converge technique, when we come back together, we try to pick the best of the best. And I think the most important thing here is that we both don't hold on too much to our ideas, and we don't have a lot of ego behind them. So I think that's in the coach community, we've created a lot of like safety and trust, and that everybody's opinion is respected. So I think that creates the ability to merge these ideas because people can let go of them just as easily as they have introduced them.
And I think it's important to say there, like most of the things we attack, the problems we attack, whether that be the sort of big room meetings or, we have a bunch of different ones. We rarely do that in our group of 9 coaches. That leads to a large sort of how should this be solved conversation that goes on for a really long time. We're almost always like, okay, who are 2 or 3 of the best people to attack this problem? Those 2 or 3 people get together and they sort of go. It doesn't mean the other coaches can't be involved at various points, but we're very rarely having this sort of committee style decision making. And that it helps that we're always about experimentation. So we come up, that group will come up with the first experiment, they'll execute on it, they'll learn from it, and that pattern will sort of repeat through the whole organization. So divide and conquer, I think, as Sam said.
Yeah, and I think this actually has just happened in the team. So we have a monthly review where the whole engineering gets together and demos what they've done. There has been some feedback about the meeting that it could be improved, that maybe we're not getting the most value out of it. So the coaches did come in handy here because the 9 coaches were able to go out and get sort of the different opinions across the globe of what's really happening. Do people like this meeting, depending on each engineering team? And then we did sort of try to do a little bit of a committee, and I think we realized that it wasn't really working. So then we did I would say our manager, Ruth, extracted it and use that opinions, but then 3 of the coaches sort of came up with the experiment that we're going to try, which is now focused on individual business units rather than whole teams. And then we'll reevaluate and have the Agile Coach team, see if it was working.
And I think that's sort of the key, right? Is if everybody is trying to be involved in fixing everything all the time, that was very poorly phrased. I trapped myself with bad sentence structure. But if that's the case, if it's like everything involves everybody, you're not ever going to finish anything. So by, Sam and I want to say Rona and Eric were the 2 other people you worked with on that. I could be wrong. Doesn't matter.
You are wrong.
I am wrong. It happens all the time. The group that Sam works solving that, I get to go and focus on something else, right? I get to spend that time. So it's not 9 people trying to solve this problem. It's 3. And then I'm with 3 other people trying to solve another problem. And a problem I get to be passionate about, right? Because I don't find the subject of that to be the most interesting subject. I'm not going to be, I can do the work, but I'm not going to be engaged and driving it with all of my fervor. It's much better to have me working on something that I really want to be doing and another group who's best suited to that working on something they should be doing. And then I just wanted to bring up one last thing is about, we're talking about playing to people's strengths. And I think a very important part of that is knowing where people's strengths aren't. And being honest with them about that. Again, I'm going to give credit to our boss Ruth on this area. She very quickly established when I am good at something and when I am not good at something. And a good example of that is I have this extremely sort of a silly vibe. There's a lot of humor in what I do. I tell a lot of jokes. I'm a little bit over the top. I'm loud and bombastic. There's a certain vibe to me. And that's a very conscious decision on my part. And that works for the vast majority of the time. It's a tool that serves me extremely well. But there are some situations where that type of person is going to be more harmful than they are going to be good. If it's, a really very, very serious discussion between people who take themselves very seriously, then don't send Jeff to do that. He's not the right person to solve that problem. If you need somebody who can have a more professional demeanor, then you're probably a lot better off with Samantha than you are with me. And sort of being honest with me and where my limitations were, I think was very good.
But how did you get there, Jeff? I mean, that's a great point. And as you say, it sounds kind of obvious, but it's not that easy to actually deliberately work on finding out what everybody's strengths are. They will be different. We're not even necessarily aware of some of our strengths and, of course, some of our colleagues' strengths. So how did you guys get, your head around who's got what strengths?
Well, in Meltwater, we're pretty focused on the Gallup Strengths Finder. I don't know if that's a known tool for everybody. So it's an assessment where you answer, I don't know how many questions it is, maybe 50. And after the assessment, you get your results, which are the top 5 strengths. So areas in which you're pretty strong in, or your talents, I should say. And that's something that all of engineering takes when they first join the company. And then we do a lot of team building activities based around these strengths. So it's initially you spending a lot of time thinking about and digesting what your strengths are. So then you can see where to apply them. But then as you do it within teams, you also get to learn what your other team members' strengths are. And I'd say that the Strengths Finder is just one tool. I think it's also through working together. Like specifically between Jeff and I just know what his strengths are due to our working relationship, and he sees mine. And I can see that with some of my the coaches I work with. And then I'm able to sort of just pick on them. Like, yeah, a little bit more energy is sometimes needed in some rooms, or somebody who's like way more process oriented is sometimes needed from, like, I'm not super process oriented. Yeah, or people. Sometimes I'm not, I like people, but sometimes maybe it's if I need a little bit more empathy, I need to go seek out a different coach. Like you learn from working with them.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. You learn it through them doing projects together and through seeing their successes and failures. I mean, I don't want to tell the stories of how, for instance, it was determined maybe I'm not right at the more formal stuff, but I've definitely made mistakes in working in the organization that were observed that led to like, okay, never send him to talk to that group of people again. That's a terrible idea. But
I think we also had to, like a little side note, we had to learn when that was good or bad in front of like certain audiences. So Jeff and I have a lot of like candor and funny back and forth, but there was some times where people were like, we can't tell if you like each other or are you guys fighting in front of this whole audience. So we've had to learn to adapt our stuff.
But actually the candor, I think, is a really important one as well. And I think this is an area that a lot of organizations have difficulty with. And I see this not only in Agile coaches, but in managers. I think being candid with the people of why you don't want them to do something is just as important as picking the right people to do something. So, we need to be better at having the hard conversation and saying, listen, I don't want you to do this because X. And actually, when we were planning back in the beginning, I talked about this product meetup that we were going to plan. I don't think Sam was there for this conversation, but my boss had talked to the person who was in charge of it. And she came to me and she said, I want you to do this thing, but there were some concerns, and she was trying to get it out. And finally, I just said, Ruth, are you just saying you don't want me to do the Jeff show, which is the shorthand for what we use when, I become a little too much the center of attention. And she said, yes, that's what I'm saying. I would like you to come and do it, but it can't be the Jeff show. And it's perfect. No problem. I will tone that down for that event. And then people like her and Sam were there to help me with it, and step in when we risk getting into that area. So, but that candor of like, listen, the Jeff show's enjoyable or useful in a lot of occasions. If you have a group of people and the energy is very low and you need to get them pepped up and excited, then that's exactly the tool you need in that situation. But if the question is about focusing on this particular thing, which is a more serious topic, that's going to not lend the right air to it. So that candor, I think, is really important.
We're getting close to the end here, guys, but I did want to ask you one question that I'm sure is in the mind of our listeners right now. So this whole community of coaches sounds great, and maybe we've got already some arguments to talk about it to our colleagues and managers and perhaps even to our leaders. But when it comes to starting a community of coaches or Scrum Masters, what are the lessons you learned when you started that process? I mean, how would you get started if you were given the opportunity to start that again today in a different organization?
The first one I would say is be deliberate. To pick the thing that you are trying to achieve and understand what you're trying to achieve with it. So if you're trying to, for instance, make the coaches seem more valuable in the organization's eyes, you're trying to do that, show the value of the coaches thing. Pick projects and be deliberate in those projects that I am doing this thing so that the organization sees that the coaches are valuable. So don't just let it happen and don't just sort of solve the problems of today. Know what it is you're trying to achieve and aim yourself at that.
Yeah, and I think the other lesson that, at least as a participant in the coach team, that I think we've learned was creating a team mentality was super important. I don't think, due to the structure that it first started, we didn't have that. And I think that if I were to start a new community, it would be focused on first, like, team learning who other people's strengths are, who they are, how can I work best with them, and then taking that Agile Coach team and putting it into the org.
Another one I think is pretty important is don't just focus on criticizing each other's ideas or sort of finding the faults with things. A big important part of the team is giving the people in the team the courage to go and do the things they want to do. So sort of providing that support and providing that encouragement. Sam often refers to me as her cheerleader, because, whenever she comes with something, I'm always like, fantastic idea. I love this idea. Go and do that thing. I think that's really important in a team, because even if it isn't the best sort of even if there was a slightly better way to do the idea, sometimes there's more value in that person gaining the confidence and getting to go do the job, getting the confidence of that job. So really sort of encouraging each other and not just sort of having it be but maybe you should change this kind of a community.
So a little bit like looking at the coaching community as a way to source energy for each of the members rather than to criticize or perfect some ideas.
I think that's yes. A great way to put it. Yeah.
And I think to add one more piece to that, because Jeff and I also talk about this often, is that I would probably say, like, don't make hierarchy a big topic in the team, because we have a varying level of, I guess, levels in our coach team, but there's no looking at one idea is better because someone at a different level said it. I gain a lot from, talking to coaches that might be at a different level than I am, because they just give a fresh perspective. So I think keeping that in mind, keeping your ego in check, if that's possible.
Yeah, and we really only have one level of hierarchy within the coach team. Maybe there's two, but I think that second level is a little bit more of just what you focus on rather than than a ranking system. And I think that's been really valuable. It's a community of equals. And actually, just a fun side note on that, Sam and I were talking the other day, because we've been working apart for a little while. We were both working as what's called the principal Agile coach, which means you're sort of responsible for a business unit, and your job is to look at the business unit as a whole. And then I came over to Sam's organization, and somebody else took over the business unit I was working on. So I was under the impression that now Sam was the boss, and I brought that up the other day, and she was like, "No, but I'm not the boss." And I was like, "I think you're the boss." And I don't think that's true. So that's sort of a good way of seeing how that hierarchy doesn't exist, right? We're both sort of there to support each other, regardless of whatever one of our titles is.
Unless I want to tell Jeff what to do, then I become the boss. But
she's, and I'm just not going to listen.
All right, guys, just before you go there, we're getting close to the end. But before we do, where can people find out more about you and the work that you're doing, Samantha?
So you can go visit us at underthehood.meltwater.com, and that's our official Meltwater engineering blog. And there's some great stuff on there.
And as always with me, it's rebelalliance.se is my, and that's .sameric. Or always recommend my book, which is bit.ly/AAT book, which Vasco always drops in the show notes. So.
Absolutely. Guys, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for sharing all of those stories and experiences with us. And thank you for your generosity with your time and your knowledge.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.